Hello, listener. Welcome to Juniverse Cheating Stories. Please subscribe for more videos.
Nathan had always prided himself on being a man of patience, especially when it came to love. He believed in the power of second chances. After all, everyone made mistakes, didn't they? His wife, Emma, had proved that during their college years when she had fallen into the arms of another man, just once, before they married. At the time, Nathan had forgiven her, chalking it up to the reckless, fleeting decisions of youth. He had moved on, or at least, he thought he had. But since the beginning of this year, a shadow had fallen over their marriage, a creeping feeling of discomfort, like a lingering chill in the air. It wasn't just the silence that had started to settle between them. It was the way Emma looked at him now, her gaze distant and cold, as though she was looking through him rather than at him. The intimacy they once shared, something that had been their foundation, seemed to vanish with each passing day. She had become a ghost in their relationship. Nathan's mind could not shake the growing suspicion that gnawed at him. The memories of her previous infidelity, the way she had acted then, haunted him now. Her sudden coldness, her emotional withdrawal, mirrored those very same signs. It was as if the past was repeating itself. One afternoon, while seated at his desk in his study, Nathan couldn't focus. His hand hovered over his phone, his thoughts racing. What if it was happening again? What if Emma was cheating once more? His gut told him that something was terribly wrong. He wrestled with the idea for a few moments. Then, without another thought, he grabbed his phone and installed a tracking app on her device. The decision was made. It felt like a small step, a tiny betrayal in itself. But Nathan had no idea that this was just the beginning of a downward spiral, one that would leave him irrevocably changed. Nathan's pulse quickened the moment his phone buzzed. The app had sent him an alert. Emma's phone wasn't at work, as she had claimed. It was at home, but there was no sign of her car when he passed by her office earlier that day. Anxiety surged through him. His mind raced with possibilities, each more sinister than the last. Could this finally be it? Could his worst fears be coming true? His hands were shaking as he drove home, his thoughts a whirlwind of anger and betrayal. He parked the car in the driveway, and, as quietly as possible, he approached the door. His heart hammered in his chest, each beat louder than the last. Emma's car sat idle, a silent witness to the truth he had been avoiding. The door creaked as he stepped inside, and the house greeted him with an eerie quiet. But as Nathan ascended the staircase, that silence was shattered. A faint noise drifted from above, the sound of muffled voices, the unmistakable rustling of sheets. Nathan's blood ran cold. His instincts screamed at him, but his feet moved without hesitation. His hands were clammy, but they held his phone steady as he silently crept toward the bedroom. His breath caught in his throat when he peeked around the corner. The sight that greeted him was enough to tear his world apart. There, in their bed, was Emma, the woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, entwined in the arms of their neighbors, Michael and Daniel. Both men, married with children, had crossed a line that Nathan could never have imagined. The sight of them together, a betrayal so raw, so undeniable, was more than just an affair. It was a brutal rupture of the life he had built with Emma. The shock of it hit Nathan like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. His fingers trembled as he recorded the scene. Unable to look away, he could hear Emma's breathless voice, but it wasn't her words that cut the deepest, it was the reality that she had chosen them over him. The world felt like it had tilted on its axis. The betrayal was complete. Nathan stood frozen in the hallway, his mind unable to process the torrent of emotions that surged through him. His hands were clammy, his entire body trembling with disbelief and fury. He could feel the fire of anger building inside, a heat that threatened to consume him entirely. This was more than just an affair. It was a calculated betrayal, an assault on everything he had worked so hard to build with Emma. His thoughts spiraled, each one darker than the last. Revenge. Justice. Something had to be done. The blood boiling in his veins propelled him into action. Quietly, almost methodically, he left the house, the weight of the moment heavy on his shoulders. His thoughts were, the first step was to secure his future, to ensure she wouldn't have access to anything that had once been theirs. Nathan quickly transferred his funds, pulled his assets into his own accounts, and began filling out the divorce paperwork. But this wasn't just about ending their marriage. It was about inflicting the kind of pain that would make Emma truly understand the gravity of her choices. He had to make her see the destruction she had wrought. The next phase of his plan was colder, more methodical. He grabbed a bottle of Emma's favorite red wine from the fridge, one she had always kept as a treat. Nathan emptied most of it into the sink, his face expressionless as the liquid swirled down the drain. Then, he crushed 2 sleeping pills into the remaining wine, careful to mix them in so thoroughly that Emma wouldn't notice anything amiss. By the time she drank it, she wouldn't even have the chance to fight back. It would be swift. She wouldn't know what hit her. When the moment of reckoning arrived, Nathan stood in the dining room, his heart pounding in his chest, his emotions a cauldron of ice and fire. He watched, almost in slow motion, as Emma descended the stairs with Michael and Daniel, their faces betraying shock the moment they saw him standing there, a figure of quiet fury. Their eyes widened, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to freeze. Nathan didn't flinch. His resolve had been hardening since the moment he discovered their betrayal. The video, the damning proof of Emma's infidelity, had already been sent to her family, her closest friends, and her parents. There was no turning back. It was already out there. An irrevocable truth that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Do you know what you've done? Nathan's voice was cold, almost detached as he met Michael's gaze. The words cut through the heavy silence, and Michael's face faltered, his cocky demeanor vanishing into thin air. He took a step back, as though the weight of Nathan's icy stare was enough to make him second-guess his bravado. Before anyone could react, Nathan took a step forward, his hands gripping the 2 carving knives from the kitchen. The gleaming steel seemed to hum with purpose in his palms. It wasn't the knives that held power, it was the man holding them. Michael's confidence shattered as he took another step back, his hands trembling at his sides. Daniel, clearly shaken, didn't hesitate. He bolted, running for the door, not willing to risk the escalating confrontation. But Emma, she stood frozen in place, pale, her eyes wide with fear and regret. Nathan's gaze never left her. The woman who had once been his everything, the woman he had trusted with his heart, was now nothing more than a stranger. His voice, when it finally came, was low, almost a whisper. "I should have known," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You never really loved me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with truth. Emma's lip trembled as she took a hesitant step forward. But Nathan was already done. The finality of the moment slammed into her with the force of a tidal wave. There was no redemption left to offer. The divorce papers sat on the table before Emma, a stark, impersonal reminder of the life she had destroyed. Nathan had been meticulous, filling out every detail, ensuring the terms were clear. A 50-50 split, no alimony, no arguments. He was being fair, even in the midst of his fury. But fairness was not what Emma wanted. The weight of her betrayal settled heavily on her shoulders. She wiped at her eyes, her hands shaking. "I know my rights. You make more money than I do. I deserve more than this." Nathan's face remained expressionless, his gaze cold and unflinching. He didn't say a word. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone with a quiet, deliberate motion. The screen lit up, revealing the damning video, the footage of Emma entwined in the arms of Michael and Daniel, her eyes wild with lust, caught in a moment of betrayal. He didn't need to say anything else. The video spoke for itself. "Sign the papers," Nathan said, his voice calm, devoid of emotion. His eyes met hers, unyielding. "This is the best deal you'll ever get. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone you know, your family, your friends, sees this. I'm sure they'll love to know the kind of woman you really are." The room grew still, the silence heavy with the unspoken truth. Emma's pride, the last shred of defiance she had, shattered before Nathan's unwavering gaze. She took a deep, shaky breath and, with hands that trembled, signed the papers. Her rebellion was over. Nathan had won. Nathan's resolve was final. He had done what needed to be done, and now there was no turning back. He packed the last of his belongings, the weight of each item, the memories, the shared moments, feeling heavier than before. The man who had left this house was no longer the man who was returning. He was a stranger to Emma now, a man broken and remade by betrayal. But Emma wasn't finished. She had a final card to play, a last attempt to salvage what was left of their marriage, to somehow regain control over the situation. She changed into her most seductive clothes, the ones that used to drive Nathan wild. She made her move, slipping into the space beside him, a soft whisper of affection in her voice as she tried to coax him back. "Nathan," she said, her voice a mixture of desperation and false sweetness. "Please, we can make this work. I've changed. I need you. I can be better. We can fix this together." Nathan didn't respond. His eyes never left the bag in front of him as he folded his clothes, moving with the precision of a man who had already left emotionally, even if his body remained behind. He didn't look at her. He didn't acknowledge her presence. There was nothing she could say now that would matter. Her attempts grew more frantic as she followed him around the house, pleading, touching, trying to draw him back into the same false promises they'd both made in the past. But Nathan had heard enough. His heart had turned to stone, and nothing she did could thaw it now. The frustration built up inside Emma, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she watched him remain unyielding. Her voice cracked as she screamed at him from the top of the stairs, her words laced with venom. "Maybe if you had been a better husband," she shouted, "I wouldn't have cheated. Maybe if you had paid more attention to me, I wouldn't be like this. This is your fault too." But Nathan remained silent, his back still turned. He didn't even glance in her direction. He wasn't the man who could be manipulated anymore. Emma had no power over him now. Her words bounced off him like empty echoes, fading into the background. He was already gone, mentally, emotionally, and physically, without saying another word. Nathan finished packing the last of his things, his resolve stronger than ever. The house, the memories, everything he had built with Emma no longer held any meaning. He had nothing left to lose. She had already taken that. As Nathan prepared to leave the house for good, Emma was comfortably ensconced on the couch, her glass of wine in hand, her demeanor one of feigned indifference. She tried to act as if she didn't care, as if nothing could shake her, but Nathan saw through the mask. He knew the truth, her life was unraveling, and she was powerless to stop it. But Nathan wasn't done. He moved with quiet, deliberate precision, a calm that belied the storm of emotions brewing within him. He grabbed another dose of sleeping pills, just enough to send Emma into a deep, undisturbed sleep. She didn't even stir as he moved her to the lawn chair outside, her body limp and defenseless in his arms. The sun blazed above them, relentless in its heat, a perfect tool for his final act of revenge. Emma wouldn't feel the consequences until it was far too late. For the next 2 days, Nathan worked efficiently, emptying out the last of their shared belongings, preparing to leave for good. He moved swiftly, his actions almost robotic, while Emma remained unconscious, her body baking under the unrelenting sun. Too drugged to fight, too far gone to save herself, she was trapped in the heat, her skin slowly blistering and burning. Nathan's heart didn't soften at the sight. He had no sympathy left for her. Her pain was deserved, and it was just the beginning. When she finally stirred, disoriented and aching, the damage had already been done. Emma stumbled inside, her skin charred, red and blistered, as though she had been abandoned in the sun for hours. Her cries of pain echoed through the empty house, her mind struggling to comprehend the extent of the suffering. She reached out for Nathan, but he didn't flinch. He watched her, cold and emotionless, as her agony intensified. Nathan didn't rush to comfort her. Instead, he calmly picked up his phone, dialed a cab, and arranged for her to be driven to the hospital. His voice was level, betraying no emotion as he spoke to the driver. "She must have fallen asleep in the sun," he said quietly, as if it was a simple accident, as if he hadn't played the architect of her torment. When Emma finally emerged from the haze of pain and confusion, the truth hit her harder than the searing sun that had burned her flesh. Her life was in ruins. Her marriage was over, her reputation shattered, and her body marked by the choices she had made. The scars on her skin would be reminders of her betrayal, the consequences of her actions permanently etched into her existence. Nathan, on the other hand, walked away from the wreckage with a sense of finality. He had no regrets. His revenge, calculated and precise, had been carried out without hesitation, each moment bringing him closer to the peace he craved. But in the quiet aftermath, he realized something deeper. The only true victory was not in the pain he had inflicted on Emma, but in his own liberation. By freeing himself from the chains of a loveless marriage, he had reclaimed control over his life, and for the first time in a long while, Nathan felt free. Emma would have to live with the fallout of her actions, her life forever altered by her betrayal. Nathan was gone, but the consequences of what she had done would remain with her for the rest of her life. The price of infidelity had been steep, and the final payment had been exacted with ruthless precision. Thank you for listening. If you were Nathan, what would you have done in his place? Which moment made you realize the betrayal was beyond repair? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more intense tales like this one.